This episode of Politics is brought to you by KALSHI.com. You guys know I love guessing about the probabilities of how various different events, especially in politics, are going to turn out. So I was thrilled when KALSHI came to me and said, hey, you want to partner up for PX3? They want to support us and we want to support them because this is way up our alley here. KALSHI is the website where you can win real money predicting pretty much anything. We got some of the markets here. How many major earthquakes will happen this year? Will SpaceX Starship do a fifth launch? Will Post Malone have a #1 album this year? And what is the president's 538 approval rating tomorrow? Things that are near term, short term, long term, it's all on KALSHI. So I'm going to highlight one of these that I really, really like because obviously they have a politics section here. How many presidential debates will happen this year? Here's how it works. You got varying different contracts here. Will there be 0 presidential debates, 1 presidential debates, 2 presidential debates, or 3 presidential debates? So we know that 0 is not going to happen because we already had 1. If you believe that the one that is scheduled on September 10th isn't going to happen, then you got a lot of value here at selecting only one is going to happen. You could buy that at a 7-cent contract. So what does that mean? Well, if you buy it at 7 cents, no matter what, every contract pays out at $1. So you would win 93 cents for every contract you bought, and you can buy as many contracts as you'd like. Now, I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that there will be 3 debates. So I'm going to buy a contract at 38 cents. That's where the market is right now for 3 debates on the dot. That means that I will win 62 cents for every contract that I buy. That's a little money. That's a little coin in my pocket. Why be right for free? Be right and make money on KALSHI. KALSHI's got hundreds of markets to trade on and has seen over 750 million in trading volume, and they keep adding new markets, and I've heard more and more political markets as well. And here's the best part. It's the only market that is legal in all 50 states. You love to see it. Head on over there and support Politics by going to KALSHI.com, KALSHI.com/PX3. That is letter P, letter X, number 3. KALSHI is supporting us by giving a $20 bonus to the first 500 people who join with our code and deposit $100. Again, that is KALSHI, KALSHI.com/PX3. $20 bonus for the first 500 people who join with that link and deposit $100. We thank KALSHI for their support of independent journalism. On this edition of the program, making sense of the Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Twitter Spaces, whatever it was, and Bill Scher to talk Kamalamentum. It's all coming up. Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for August 13th. 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you from Austin, Texas, getting prepared to head off to Chicago, the Windy City, Second City, Toddlin' Town, city with too many nicknames. Very, very excited for that. But before we do, we need to get into what happened last night on Twitter. There are 2 names in my life that I don't feel are just the letters that comprise them. No, for many people, they are full sentences, if not paragraphs, if not tomes. And those 2 names are Donald Trump and Elon Musk. your priors about those two men are often going to define everything they do. There's a reason why Donald Trump is the most defined man in politics. There's a reason that Elon Musk has, for his entire career, for different reasons, been a clickbait goldmine. And so when they came together to have a 2+ hour conversation on Twitter Spaces, I didn't really pay a ton of attention to it initially because I kind of knew what people were going to say about it. Those who loved both of these men would think it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Finally, a fireside chat for our modern era. For those that hated them, and in this day and age, usually you either love or hate both of them in a pair, it would be an overlong, rambling, unfocused waste of everybody's time. So initially, I wasn't even going to listen to it. I had other stuff to do. I'm trying to get an episode of World's Greatest Con out before my daughter comes out. So I was working on other stuff. And then it was late, which is really funny because Donald Trump spent a lot of time making fun of Ron DeSantis for launching his campaign on Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk because they couldn't get the tech right initially. And then eventually it happened. And by the time that it happened, there had been enough chatter that I figured I'd pop in and listen. And predictably, those that love those two thought exactly what I thought, and those that hate those two spent the entire time relentlessly mocking it. Although it does tell you something about both of those men's centering in our popular culture that even those that hated it listened to it. I don't have a lot of takeaways on it. There are elements of it that enemies of Donald Trump will use to bash him about the head and face, up to and including Trump joking with Elon Musk about how ruthless he is about firing people who are trying to unionize. Not exactly the kind of thing you would say if you had had the Teamsters head speak at your convention not but a few weeks prior. But there was also the kind of plain spoken populism that has defined Donald Trump. The president that you could sit down and discuss policy with in plain English, if even at times comically informal. And I want to take one of those moments because I do think that there was something that stuck out to me as a particularly Trumpian moment, both comically hilarious and informative if you've paid attention to this, while revealing the core of his foreign policy. And so I'm going to play the clip first in all of its absurdity and then go into why it matters.
And again, I said to Vladimir Putin, I said, don't do it. You can't do it, Vladimir. You do it, it's going to be a bad day. You cannot do it. And I told him things that what I do. And he said, no way. And I said, way. And it's the last time we ever had the conversation.
So obviously what stands out? We are a long way from Henry Kissinger when the former and possible future president of the United States is discussing foreign policy with what quite possibly could be our greatest geopolitical adversary in the same way that Bill and Ted would discuss whether or not they needed to get into the phone booth. But let's peel back the layers a little bit. What Donald Trump is talking about is Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. And prior to that clip, he said that Ukraine was the apple of Vladimir's eye. And Vladimir Putin often talked about going into Ukraine. What Donald Trump says he told him that would be a very bad day, something that Putin responded to with no way, to which Trump said, way, is according to other reporting, something that Trump has said at fundraisers. Now, this has been described in many ways, some serious, some joking, but he has allegedly said that if Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, the United States would bomb Moscow. That is something that you might imagine Vladimir Putin would respond, no way to. This is at the heart of Donald Trump's foreign policy, and Donald Trump's foreign policy in this election in particular, because you have seen a gender polarization in this electorate. Women are very much in the camp of Democrats and only polarizing further, and men are very much in the camp of Republicans and only polarizing further. This comes in all different age stratas. What Donald Trump is signaling, and did repeatedly last night, is that you need somebody who is tough, because it doesn't matter whether or not you think it is right, whether or not you think it is barbaric. The only thing that Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping understand is strength. And sometimes strength means saying, well, if you want to do that, I will do something that would almost guarantee World War III. So think very hard before you do it. He wants to draw a contrast with Joe Biden, who is looked at very negatively on foreign policy, at least on the test of did you keep world peace? We are now funding not one, but two hot wars, and one in the Middle East that is getting hotter. In fact, one in Ukraine that is currently getting hotter as Ukraine pushes into Russia. But then there's also this. In Franklin Foer's book, The Last Politician, which had a lot of voices from within not only the Biden administration, but if I'm going to read between the lines, the State Department, because there was a lot of stories that were told inside closed doors of the State Department. Vladimir Putin told the Biden administration the exact same thing, that he had designs on invading Ukraine. But according to that book, the answer was not, I will bomb Moscow from the United States. Instead, it was to dutifully take down what Putin had said, bring it back to the State Department, bring it back to the White House, because this was not a conversation privately between Biden and Putin, and to then inform Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, who in that book, they kind of throw under the bus by saying that he was unprepared and didn't believe the warnings that were being given by the United States. But at least according to available evidence, we do see some kind of foreign policy cleavage. There is the modern State Department, which was also a lot of the same people from the Obama State Department, that seem to believe there are events outside of their control. And then there is the very aggressive Trump perspective, which believes that everything can be controlled and negotiated for. You just need to know the right pressure points. And while Vladimir Putin will take anything that is left unguarded, he will certainly be calculated if there is an expectation that something would be very, very radically different for him if he tried to be over aggressive. Further on the negotiation point, Trump went on and on about how Biden gave away the game and therefore doomed Ukraine to war, when members of the State Department talked openly about Ukraine being on track to be a NATO country. This galls Trump because, again, everything in his mind is a negotiation. Why would you give away a position if you didn't have to? Why would you ever mention NATO and Ukraine in the same sentence unless it benefited you to do that? Now, the State Department would say, or at least has said in the past, that provoking a fight with Russia is in the United States' interest because it would degrade the military of a superpower. And indeed, that's what's happening right now. Then again, none of that really makes it into mainstream coverage of stuff like this, largely because it's Elon Musk and Donald Trump. People already know what they're going to know about them. I saw one tweet last night that said this was billed as a uncensored conversation between two people, not an adversarial interview, and so therefore you would learn the real Trump. And a commentary class account said, well, it just sort of sounds like every interview he does and every stump speech, so I'm logging off. And in that, right there, you know everything you need to know about why people hate or love the retail politics of Trump. Because for some who generally just have a dislike for the man, to hear that same brand over and over and over and over again, even if you want to give him a shot, for him to not have the class to moderate just a little bit to where you want to be, is galling. It's infuriating. It's a pebble in the shoe that won't go away. But on the other hand, if you like him, then it is a warm blanket that he doesn't modulate who he is, no matter where he is. His stump speeches sound like his interviews, sound like his overlong, rambling conversations with Elon Musk. And let me tell you this, Twitter Spaces are not exactly known for their brevity as a medium, and we certainly did not see any Algonquin roundtable repartee last night when these two men decided to monologue to each other. But that's a feature, not a bug for some. And it shows you the difference between where Trump is and where Kamala Harris is. There was commentary this week that Kamala Harris's bounce in the polls might end the concept of the long campaign. You've seen some of this floating around over the last month as well, that maybe, as we joked about on this show a few weeks ago, the smoky back room is back. Why even have primaries when you can just surprise your opponent with a candidate that hasn't been attacked yet? The modern Democratic Party is terrified of an unforced error. And that is why they are gleeful when Donald Trump talks. They are gleeful when he has a press conference because, they can pick out all the little unforced errors and they can blast it out on all their channels. They're gleeful when he's on Twitter because they can pick out what they view as all the little unforced errors and they can blast it out. And if you do that enough, you can define your opponent because they are desperately afraid of Kamala being defined, which is why she hasn't done an interview. And why I can understand from their perspective, they don't want her to. Because then something bad could happen. And if something bad happens, then they can't control the message. These are two very different political philosophies. And we're going to talk more with Bill Scher about that a little bit later in the program. But Donald believes authenticity trumps everything. If you know who he is, whether or not you totally agree, you will at least have a sense that he will do what he says when he comes to office. Kamala Harris believes that you can believe whatever you'd like about her as long as you vote for her, and all of her fire is going to be trained across the line. She's not going to explain who she is nearly at all. She is going to explain why Donald Trump is an active threat. And that, as we have evolved this truncated race, I do believe is the battleground for which the election will be won. Can Kamala Harris continue to center Donald Trump as an active threat that you cannot stand as an independent voter? And then on the other hand, can Donald Trump stay on message to convince people that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the most radically left ticket in the history of America? Whoever comes closer to winning, I believe, will be the victor of an extraordinarily close election. Now, you might disagree. You might say, no way. And I would say, way. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. At TakePoliticsSeriously.com, you get 2 bonus episodes each and every week. for the low, low price of one cup of coffee, $3 a week. You guys might have heard there was some news about Patreon. I'm going to get to it at the end of the segment. Let's get into the news here first. The FBI is investigating an alleged hacking incident targeting Donald Trump's campaign, which also reportedly involves attempts to access email accounts from officials of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's 2024 campaign. The breach, revealed by a Microsoft report, involved Iranian hackers sending a spear phishing email to a Trump campaign official. Sensitive documents were subsequently leaked to Politico. A senior Trump campaign official that had their email compromised is reportedly Roger Stone, the longtime Trump advisor. He was contacted by the FBI regarding the unauthorized use of said email. This investigation began in June, and while there were similar phishing attempts against the Biden-Harris officials, there is no evidence as of yet that they were successful. The Trump campaign has linked the attack to hostile foreign entities, but hasn't confirmed coordination with law enforcement. This reportedly resolved with a anonymous emailer named Robert, not my middle name. Well, it is my middle name, but it wasn't my sentient middle name trying to affect the 2024 election. I only make money on it. Just a war profiteer, not a mercenary. Robert emailed Politico and apparently a few other outlets saying that he had authentic opposition research files of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio. This was then reported by Politico over the weekend, and that brings us to where we are. But Roger Stone has not been involved directly. Roger Stone has not been involved in the campaign of Donald Trump directly, and that apparently was why that email, which was gained access to, was then used to email other currently operating Trump officials that loosed the information. One thing that was fascinating about the Politico story, though, is that there was not the same treasure trove of emails that happened with the WikiLeaks hack back in 2016, because post-WikiLeaks hack, a lot of the private conversation happens via Signal and not over email, which is interesting. Special counsel Jack Smith is facing challenges in the Trump January 6 case following the Supreme Court's ruling that grants former presidents broad immunity from criminal prosecution for actions taken while in office. Smith, who initially sought a quick trial before 2024's election, is now reconsidering his approach. He may narrow the case, present more evidence, and indict co-conspirators such as Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman. The Supreme Court's decision complicates the case by limiting the use of evidence related to Trump's official acts, which could lead to charges being dropped or revised. Smith has requested a delay to assess the impact of the ruling, with a status conference set for September 5th. The ruling raises concerns about what presidential conduct is prosecutable, leaving significant discretion for the courts in future cases. Smith's next step will likely become clearer after the extended deadline on August 30th. This ain't getting heard, but there was new Trump commercials that came out this week that made specific reference to these cases and the New York case that convicted him. I would not be shocked if Trump uses, at least to turn out his base and possibly persuadable independents, that this is a race to save the future of lawfare in this country. Because if he loses, then he is almost certainly going to jail and there will be irreparable damage to America. I would not be shocked if that's an argument that he makes. We'll see. Finally, President Biden is going to address the Democratic National Convention's opening night in Chicago. Curtain jerker. Sitting president of the United States. Initially planning to obviously close the convention as the nominee, Biden now faces the unusual task of highlighting his achievements while paving the way for another Democrat to lead the party. His speech will emphasize his legislative success, including infrastructure, climate, and healthcare laws, and the convention will reintroduce Vice President Kamala Harris, culminating in her acceptance speech on Thursday. The event will also feature speeches from figures like Hillary Clinton, who will also speak on night one, and Barack Obama, who will speak on Wednesday with Tim Walz, and aims to showcase the Democrats' focus on America's future while contrasting it with Trump's self-obsession. The DNC's challenge is to create an impactful moment that resonates beyond the convention. So Bill Clinton speaking, Hillary Clinton speaking, and Obama is speaking, along with Biden, who's going to speak in the same slot that Amber Rose got at the RNC. Monday is usually Kooks night, as the Hacks on Tap folks have said in the past. So take that for what you will, that the sitting president of the United States is going to speak before Bill Clinton and Obama. Obviously, the VP and the nominee headline night 3 and 4. For a convention that's supposed to focus on the future, a lot of headliners are from the past. Bill Clinton's interesting because theoretically, whenever you're a two-time president, you should probably speak at your party's convention whenever you want to. Bill had to take a seat for a little bit because of Me Too. But now he's back. Me Too's kind of done. Obama obviously can speak whenever he wants because he is a popular two-term president that has largely remained in his post-presidential life scandal-free. But night one, and by the way, that, at least as of now, is the only night I am definitely going to be there. We saw our OBGYN, me and my wife, talked to them about how long it would be safe for me to be out of town. And the agreed upon days were at least to see night one of the convention. So that seems to be what I'm going to do. And I'm very excited because, boy, you know me, vibe sommelier. I want to be in that room. I want to be there. I want to see how they react to old Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. Real quick note on the Patreon front, because TakePoliticsSeriously.com does lead you to our Patreon. So there was a email that went out from Patreon saying that the per creation option, it's a little bit behind the scenes, so follow along with me. The per creation option is going to be discontinued on their site next year. This is something that Patreon has been trying to do for a while. It is very frustrating to me because it is how I have interacted with you, the faithful of this program, for as many years as I have done anything on Patreon. I've always found that the per creation model, which essentially is a weekly charge option for us, is something that keeps me honest. It prevents me from taking weeks off because if I don't move my feet, then I don't eat, to put it in the paraphrase terms of Outcast. So at some point next year, there will be a changeover to a different way of charging. We will get to that when we come to it. For right now, Patreon is exactly the same solution it has always been. One more note that came out during that email, that very interesting email that came into my inbox yesterday, is that Apple is now going to charge a 30% upcharge for anybody who subscribes to Patreon, to my Patreon and every Patreon from the iOS app. That just means that it's going to charge you more when you do it. My great thought would be, don't do it on the iOS app. You can still subscribe for the exact same price without the Apple tax on the website. So just head to takepoliticsseriously.com on your web browser and just do it there. That's my thought. What you get for your money is 2 bonus episodes each and every week. And we're going to do a bonus episode from Chicago, the Toddlin' Town. On Sunday, I will have at least walked the floor and gotten a sense of how everything is going down. And then we will be broadcasting. There will be at least 1 episode from the DNC. And then when I am back here in Austin to tend to my extraordinarily pregnant wife, we will be doing a little bit of live stream for nights 3 and 4. That's the plan as of now. Something changes. We're a little shorter. We're a little longer. We'll figure that out. But there we go. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. A lot of news. A lot of news. Oh, by the way, one more piece of news. If you're in Chicago and you want to see me, Jen Briney, Andrew Heaton, and a special guest appearance of Tom Merritt, then you can see us all at the Greenhouse Theater in Chicago this Sunday, the 18th of August. Find tickets at my Twitter. It is the pinned tweet at the top of my page. There we go. Info dump done. Now let's get to Bill Scher. Joined now by the one and only Bill Scher of Washington Monthly. Now, it didn't happen exactly the way that you wanted. You wanted Joe Biden to resign during the RNC, correct. Kamala Harris to be the president, and the rollout to go like that. But with some minor alterations, you pretty much got exactly where you wanted to get anyway. How do you grade what has happened over the last 3 weeks for the Democrats?
I mean, there's really very little to quibble about. I do think that Harris being president would have its own advantages, but what we still got is a quick consolidation around Harris.
Yes.
I always thought mini primary was pure idiocy. I mean, to think of how different this would have been if Biden did not endorse Harris. And this period of time would have been a scrum of different candidates that would get hashed out on the floor of the convention.
Yeah, we saw a mini version of that with the VP selection, right?
Yeah.
Like there was more oppo dumped on somebody like Josh Shapiro than you would have liked. I mean, considering he will likely have a future in politics, national politics beyond Pennsylvania, there was more oppo dumped on him than you would have expected. But also, to your point, and I totally agreed with you, that would have been everybody. Everybody would have had that level of oppo dumped, more than that dumped on them if this were some kind of compressed month and a half primary. It would have been a tremendous inside shooting match. And Kamala probably would have won anyway.
Exactly, but perhaps in a more diminished way. The notion that she would have come out sort of stronger, it's always hard to run a counterfactual in real life because you only can do one thing. But it's hard to argue there was some way that Harris would come out stronger than she is right now, where she has literally moved the needle in national polling averages about 5 points. Almost nothing has moved the needle 5 points. Like getting convicted doesn't move the needle 5 points. Yeah. This has been as good as anyone could have possibly imagined. And so part of it is Biden doing the quick endorsement.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is Kamala Harris' own performance. I mean, if her first speaking appearance after getting Biden's endorsement was like a B-, a non-A+, a little bit off, a little stumble maybe, just maybe a little deer in the headlights, then you might have had, because there always was this sort of undercurrent of concern. Is she ready for prime time? Can she win the swing states? She didn't do a good job in 2020. So if there was any validation of that concern, then maybe you wouldn't have had the same kind of euphoric consolidation. You might have had one or two other candidates. The fact that she came right out of the gate, hitting every mark, I think instilled a confidence in the vast majority of rank and file Democrats. Oh, this could really happen. Yeah, I have reason to get excited because I don't have to. I can get out of this period of self-flagellation and doom and gloom because she's actually prepared for this moment, and that has just sort of fed on itself ever since.
I will say they have kept her on a very specific minutes regulation, and they have not. Nothing that she has done is something that I ever thought was a weakness for her. From her launch of Frank Agawa Plaza for her 2019 campaign, she proved herself to be a meet-the-moment public speaker that could present the idea of a gigantic change. She raised a ton of money, which she has raised now, obviously multiplied by the stage that she is on. The stuff that wound up sinking her in 2019, we've still kind of yet to see her do, but we can get to that in a second because I want to stay on the stay on the positive here. She rolls out, and you have the VP selection. What were your thoughts on that?
You know, I was kind of all over the map on VP. My initial preference was Roy Cooper, and I would still say that might have been a better choice, not to take anything away from Walz, but just the fact that Cooper might have pulled in North Carolina would in and of itself be worth it. He may not have been as exciting as Walz. I mean, Cooper was blander, more scripted, slow Southern draw, Southern gentleman type. But that guy just wins. That guy wins. The guy literally does not lose in North Carolina. And there's a fair argument that VPs don't carry states, and I largely subscribe to that. Yeah. But there's an argument that they can maybe bring in a couple of points. A couple of points might be the difference in North Carolina. So, and I think they had a longer relationship together. Harris and Cooper both being AGs. So I still kind of wanted him when he bowed out, and I saw Walz. Well, I saw the weird comment when he first delivered it, and I was like, wow, who's this guy? I mean, I wish I could say, like, I know the Democratic bench inside out. Oh, I knew about Tim Walz back in 2007 when he was a fighting Dem running for the House. So I'm not going to pretend I had that deep level of knowledge. But when I first saw that, I was like, this guy... I saw the appearance, like, this guy's great. And then I went on Wikipedia, I was like, this guy's resume is insane. You know, so I had that initial, like, who is this guy? But there was a part of me that was like, maybe he hasn't been properly well vetted. Maybe there's gonna be something. I mean, I saw the DUI charge was being pushed around like 24 hours before the pick. I was like, is there something else out here I don't know about? So I wasn't like all in on Walz, and also I thought it was gonna be Shapiro because they picked Philadelphia for the first appearance. Yep. And I wasn't buying that the last interviews were going to be determinative. They picked Philadelphia. They know it's going to be Shapiro. They're just going through the motions here. And so I was kind of psyching myself up for Shapiro. He wasn't even on my top three at first. Like, I mean, after I saw Walz, I was like Cooper, Walz, Bashir. That's kind of where I was. Mostly because, well, one, I thought Shapiro was a little green. He's only been governor for 2 years, not even. And I didn't want to see Israel get relitigated. I accept the point that his position on Israel really isn't any different than pretty much any other Democrat.
Walz's,
Shapiro's. But he came in a little hot on the protesters, and I just thought it might dredge things up more than you would want. But one, if he was going to bring in Pennsylvania, so what? And
who cares? Yeah.
And if it was going to make Trump go insane over another bad Jew shouldn't vote for this Jew because he's not Jewy enough. If his whole campaign was going to be Kamala's not really black and Shapiro's not really Jewish, I'm like, I'll run that race. That's
sure,
race.
Yeah.
So I was kind of getting into Shapiro at the end, and then but Walz. I mean, look, you really can't complain about this rollout. That guy's just been phenomenal, and I think the attacks on him like with Harris, the Trump-Vance strategy has just been spaghetti at the wall. Let's just throw everything and see what sticks. And for some reason, they brought in the, military veteran attack line on Walz, and that ended up having the most legs, quote unquote, than say his handling of the riots. I think they should have focused on the riots, quite frankly.
I mean, I think obviously, I feel like this since July, this has been a election coverage on edibles where every day feels like 5 months.
Right.
And so it's like, I'm with you where it's like, oh, like they've thrown a bunch of stuff at him and nothing stuck. It's like, it's been 7 days.
Right,
like we have a long way to go between now and November, and whether or not anything sticks to Tim Walz, I don't really think that it matters unless it affects Kamala Harris, because to me, this entire ball game from now until November is, if Kamala Harris can remain as smooth of a candidate as she is right now, where she could be the San Francisco liberal who's also the border hawk, who also is got progressive bona fides, but also is cool with fracking. If she can remain that smooth or something relative to this, then it's a ball game. It's a total referendum on Trump. It's a total referendum on age on the Republican side. And there's not really a whole lot you can do. The goal right now, from the Republican perspective, in my view, is you do have to categorize Kamala Harris and Tim Walz by proxy as being far left. If they can do that, then this is something that will be good for them. If they can't, then they can't. The military stuff for me, it's sand in the gears. It was literally just to get anything on chyrons that wasn't Kamala definition of bravery ? We'll have our panel discuss. The fact that it was there at least showed that there was some kind of sand in the gear. Whether or not it matters going forward, I have no idea.
Well, generally speaking, I mean, as Donald Trump said accurately, generally speaking, VPs don't matter.
They don't.
You get a bunch of attention the first few days. They fade to the background. You focus on the top of the ticket. But Vance had a particularly poor VP rollout. And amazingly, it's because I think it was Ron Filipkowski, if I think I'm pronouncing his last name right, who's one of the guys on the left, broadly speaking, who's highly active on X and Threads, pushing out video clips. And I believe he was the first to bring back the childless cat ladies clip. And that just took off. And weeks later, Vance is still being asked about it. And that is not a good rollout. If you're still being asked about this thing you said, and because all the answers Vance gives don't explain it well. He tries to pivot and basically retcon it and claim it's about something else entirely. And it's not a satisfying answer. And so it's at a point where it's too late. It's now hung out there as a thing he will be known for, period. Walz, they seem to have gone back to what did the Republicans say about Walz when he ran for governor in 2018, and Walz won. Let's see what we can dredge up that again. And the best they have on the military record thing is he didn't go to Iraq after his 24th year in the National Guard. And he said he carried weapons in war when he wasn't in combat. Which is not quite the same thing, because he was part of Operation Enduring Freedom in a support role in Europe, not on the Afghan battlefield. In Italy, yeah. Which he's always said. He's never said otherwise. So there's no argument he had sort of this sort of long game to pretend he was in Afghanistan when he wasn't. They just call him in one instance when he's talking about gun control, making a reference of carrying weapons in war, which the Harris campaign called a misspeak.
And it was a clip that they put out.
Yeah. So
it was and so I mean it's
a thin it's a thin read. My point is it's a thin read, and you could say, well, we don't know how much it landed until we get polling a week from now. Fair enough, but I was alive for Swift boats. I was alive for what John Kerry went through. It was days and days and days of smears before the Kerry campaign responded, because they weren't. I don't necessarily nitpick about it. I think it's a hard position for them to be in, but the different media landscape, different social media landscape. There was a bit of an old school mentality. You don't respond too soon and give it oxygen if you don't have to.
Yeah.
And they're kind of biding their time, and they miscalculated. It happens. In this environment, everything is 24/7 nonstop. You never wait. And I think this attack line got blunted in real time. Some people are going to believe it. If you're in Trump world, you're going to believe it. But I don't think they've nearly ruined the general Coach Walz, fun-loving, regular Midwestern guy vibe with this. I think he'll probably fade to the background, like VPs usually do, in a week or so, and we're back to the top of the ticket, which is the best you can expect. So I have no criticism or complaint about how the Walz rollout has gone through. I think it's been all net positive for the Harris campaign.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at enthusiasm, if you look at money, any of the hard metrics for which you would judge a rollout, it is hard to say that things have not gone well. I do think I'm just gonna. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on it.
We can go negative. We can.
No.
Speculate.
I'm not going negative. Not going negative. I just want to mark it. So if in case we revisit these conversations, if the Harris campaign loses Pennsylvania by 1%,
sure,
this conversation will be relitigated.
Absolutely. No question.
There will be yes.
No question.
There will be another look at whether or not this was too cute and whether or not there was too much focus paid on the protester angle of the the party. But
sure,
in general, it is hard to say that things have not gone very, very well. The question then becomes, how long can you run on vibes? Because there has not been a policy proposal. The only thing that we have seen policy-wise outside of the stump speech, which I do think that Kamala Harris has given ably, if for some varying different temperatures of responses to Gaza protesters in Michigan and then in Glendale. I thought Glendale's response was a lot better than Michigan's response. The only thing we've seen was her in Vegas saying that she's now for taxes on tips, or no taxes on tips, which has been a Trump signature. Give me your perspective. How do you roll out explaining who Kamala Harris is right now compared to who she was in 2019?
Well, we have to add one other data point here, which is very soon after she became the presumptive nominee, the campaign very quietly, through an anonymous spokesperson, said, "Oh, she's not for a fracking ban.
Beep.
She's not
Back it on up.
Single payer." Right.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article back in December 2019. This is during the 2020 primary, and it was forgive me for taking a circuitous route to this answer, but it was all about the trials of the wine track candidate. Why can't the wine track candidates like Pete Buttigieg and Elizabeth Warren, and going back in history, Paul Tsongas, Bill Bradley, Gary Hart, Howard Dean, why do they have a problem? They get an initial boost early in the primary, and they can't pivot and broaden their support and actually win. And so part of the article, and I was talking to a lot of old campaign managers. I was talking to Tsongas' campaign manager. I was talking to Paul Simon's campaign manager.
Nice.
I talked to Gary Hart directly. And so a lot of it came down to, how do you pivot? And a lot of it was like, well, at some point you really can't pivot. You are who you are. You can't be phony. But one of the campaign managers said, you got to pivot when they're not looking. You got to pivot early.
Yeah.
And look, there's only how early you can be when you're running an 100-day sprint of a campaign. This is not 2023, it's 2024. But to the extent that Harris had to pivot, they did it right away when there was a lot of hullabaloo going on.
Yeah.
It wasn't out of the candidate's own mouth. I mean, obviously, and the Trump campaign is going to hit her on it, and that's a legitimate hit.
Well, I mean, like, look, the liability, and this is again where we come to what I think is the whole ball game of, like, Kamala Harris will be more defined than she is now a month from now, right? And the closer we get to the election, she will be more defined. How much more defined, we don't know. And the ammunition from the Trump team is to blanket the airwaves in the states that matter with everything she said into a microphone in 2019. Right. And to say, this is Kamala Harris, and it's going to be her in 4K, slow jamming the news, saying that I'm for banning fracking on day one.
Right. And I imagine they'll do some of that. Their ability to focus, the Trump campaign's ability to focus is suspect, but I suspect they will do some of that.
The candidate's ability to focus for sure. Right. That is. I actually thought that J.D. Vance had a good week last week. I thought that they found a use case for him that at least made the Harris campaign react to it. You mentioned that they blunted it in real time, but there was an incoming attack for them to do that. The top of the ticket, on the other hand, if he's going to spend his time on Truth Social talking about AI pictures and not about Kamala Harris's ban on fracking, then boy, I don't know what they're doing.
Well, there's a certain method to their madness, in that they're trying to put everything into a frame of phoniness.
Yes.
Whether it's racial identity or issue-based flip-flopping or the crowds. I mean, obviously, much of the stuff is not factually based, but there is an overarching theme there.
Well, I don't know whether or not that is jazz of just making the notes that go with whatever is coming out of the top of the ticket's mouth, or if it's 4D chess. But there certainly is a through line of Kamala Harris is a chameleon phony who will say literally anything to get elected.
And they're saying that about Walz too. That's
yes.
all. It's all now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems with it. One is that neither Trump or Vance have a great track record on authenticity. They are target-rich environments when it comes to phoniness.
Vance, I would say. Trump is who he is, right? Like there. If,
but who
there's one
he
thing,
is a liar. So,
but that's fine. I mean, like, look, if those who believe him to be a liar, we're not going to vote for him. There's a reason why he's hard capped at 48% in terms of popularity.
But I mean, you could very easily in a debate setting, and they're going to have at least one debate apparently. Mm-hmm. Kamala, you flip-flopped on single payer. Donald Trump, you flip-flopped on single payer. You flip-flopped on being pro-choice. But we saw what you did in office, and we saw how you damaged the American people. Sure, I don't know how she's going to do it this way, but she could say, I was concerned about fracking when I ran in 2020, but I joined up with Joe Biden. He had a bit of a different view, and we found a way to regulate fracking and cap methane emissions without banning it entirely. And now our fossil fuel production is as high as it's ever been, while also pivoting to a clean energy economy. So I think there's a way to get to look. Like J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance says, well, I criticized Trump before, but then he was a great president, so now I'm with him now. I mean, in and of itself, that's a perfetly fine answer. I think there's a lot of other stuff to say about Vance that undercuts that, and I could talk to you about that for the next 45 minutes. But I think there's a way for Harris to explain her shifts, because those kinds of shifts are pretty standard political flip-flops, and they're not that hard to explain. Some of the stuff about Trump and Vance get to more fundamental elements of their
I don't know. Those are pretty hard turns to go from I'm for banning private insurance to I am not for banning private insurance and I'm for banning fracking to...
She scurried away from single payer during the primary.
Yes. But again, it's like where you're always going to be judged against your furthest take on the polls. And I think what we're also seeing, I think, which is just fascinating from a media perspective, is, 2019 was the most media rich we had ever seen a primary, just in terms of the amount of debates, the amount of political attention for somebody to be on television, on camera, or at an event where there is 4K recording of everything and being asked these kinds of questions. The 2019 primary was a very far left primary, right? Like it was in general, the mood of the general mood was progressive. Now, the least progressive among them, Joe Biden, wound up being the last one standing, which probably tells you a little bit about where the electorate was. But a lot of people said a lot of things, and now it's just going to be interesting to see how that stuff is not only deployed, against Kamala, but also how it's received, whether or not it is something that, from your perspective, I think is totally legit. She flip-flopped in the middle of that primary, let alone by the end of it, let alone where she is now.
Yeah, I mean, her mistake in that primary was running farther to the left than she actually is. And she, I think, had difficulty melding the idealistic and the pragmatic. So it came across kind of awkward. And so the campaign fizzled out. And it's totally fair game for the Trump campaign to pick up those quotes and throw them back in her face. But she does have the experience of being vice president, standing with Joe Biden for the last 4 years, and she can use that to say, I said these things before, but I when I was running against Joe Biden, having worked with Joe Biden, I had opportunity to rethink these things and to see how his strategies would work in practice. I think when it came to fracking, it worked out great. And that's why I've modified my position to something that is still sensitive to our environmental concerns, but also ensuring that we produce enough energy. You, Donald Trump, said during the Republican primary that you were for single-payer health care, and then you got into office and you tried to repeal Obamacare. You did nothing to provide more health insurance for the average American. So I've stayed true to my values in trying to create enough energy so people can live their lives and access affordable energy while also having a clean environment to a state of climate change. You, sir, did nothing to help anybody while you were president of the United States. That's how I would handle it.
And if those words came out of the mouth of Kamala Harris, I think that it would benefit. Where to me, it is very clear that the campaign is putting her in a little bit of a bubble, and I don't blame them for it, because you want to run this enthusiasm until the enthusiasm wanes before you take any kind of chances. But I do think that it shows that the folks that she is trusting for now, which also shows something that is different from 2019, because she had a lot of problems internally with her campaign because it was among the most leaky of that entire cycle, is that they don't want to put her in front of a mic to give her any kind of extemporaneous talking. Not a friendly interview, not a long form, a challenging interview. It has been pretty restrictive.
Yes, and it can't go on forever. She will have to do interviews, but for a typical campaign, you want to do as many staged events as possible where you control the message. That your job as a campaign operative is to have your preferred message dominate that day's news cycle for as many days as possible until the end of the campaign. And anytime you do an unscripted event, whether it is an interview or a press conference or a town hall, you run the risk of that day's message not being your preferred message. So you try to avoid that. Of course, it is. And if it was at all possible, if you were 10 points ahead and there was no public pressure on you to do an interview, you would do no interviews because you'd be winning the race without it. Kamala Harris has been able to gain about 5 points in 3 weeks without doing an interview. So therefore, it is not wrong for her to not do an interview. However, at some point, you can only give so many canned speeches and expect to win the day with your message, because at some point your scripted messaging isn't that interesting anymore. So you have to do something off script to generate the kind of press, to generate any sort of press attention. So that day is going to come, and it's an open question how well she does in that environment. We've seen how well she does in the stage environment. It's been great. An unscripted environment is potentially different, and that is a hurdle for her to overcome.
There's plenty of example of those things going wrong for her.
Sure.
Right? That is a known weakness in terms of Kamala Harris's game.
I mean, I wouldn't say like she whiffs every interview she's ever done. I've seen lots of interviews where she does just fine, but she's had bad moments, as almost any politician has. I don't think she's uniquely bad at them or anything like that. But she has certain questions that we haven't seen her answer, like the changes in position, like do you think the American Rescue Plan sent inflation through the roof? Do you regret that policy?
Yeah.
Do you feel that Joe Biden was in cognitive decline and you saw and you hid it from the American public? What did you see? What did you know? When did you know it? We haven't had those kinds of questions thrown at her.
Nope.
And so we have to see how she handles those things. But I think that day is going to come. It looks like after the convention. I think they're going to ride this.
I think that's as soon as she said at the end of the month, I'm like, okay, so after the convention, that you are going to do your best to ride this out until and she has 1 week. She has this week to ride it out, and then we will see what happens after that.
And it might have been harder for her to stretch it out that long, to essentially go through the entirety of August, or nearly the entirety of August, without an interview, if not for the fact that Trump and Vance keep creating their own earned media in a negative way for themselves. I mean, if we weren't so focused on Trump making up a story about a near helicopter crash, or making up stories about artificial intelligence created crowd size images, or accusing Harris of claiming she wasn't black and now she is black. All these things soak up a lot of media attention, not to mention all of Vance's trials and tribulations. That makes it easier for Harris to skate. And she is skating for the time being.
I do think that what we are seeing here, whether or not we believe that that the Republican side of the aisle is firing at all cylinders, is a very different fundamental concept of what matters in media. Because what you've just described is the classic, tried and true concept of a campaign. Maintain message discipline, hammer home the issues that you want to hammer, wait until the points are waning, and then spike it again with something else, and then continue week after week, month after month, hammer home your specific themes. That is predicated on the idea that there are gatekeepers for which will put out X, Y, or Z message, right? That you are talking to television editors, you are talking to newspaper editors, you are talking to these people that are the traditional disseminators. What the Trump campaign has from the very beginning been is a largely social media, decentralized media concept where, sure, throw a million things out there. Some of them might even just be total stinkers, just bad takes, mistakes. What matters is that in a decentralized situation, as long as you say one thing that people can latch onto, they will latch onto that, and that will be their own reality because we don't share one media universe. And I don't know where in that process we are in 2024, because I can make an argument either way.
I always come back to the fact that Donald Trump's political track record, his win-loss record, is very poor. He won one presidential contest in a very fluky fashion, losing the popular vote and just barely eking down in a few swing states against a candidate who had a lot of her own baggage. He had a bad 2018 midterm. He lost the House in 2018. In 2020, he lost the presidency and the Senate. And in 2022, many of his favorite candidates also lost. The Democrats picked up a Senate seat. House barely won the House, so barely that they barely even control it. And that much of the governing of the House is done in coalition with Democrats. So I don't have a lot of respect for Donald Trump's political skills and media strategy. There was a sense in 2016 that there was method to the madness. That just, it doesn't matter how crazy or dishonest or outlandish the comments are, so long as he made himself central to the media narrative, it worked in his favor. And that logic has not been borne out in subsequent elections. So, and nothing I've seen in the past month, wherein Donald Trump has responded to the wave of Kamalamentum with higher and higher levels of insanity, that, and with no evidence that that is benefiting him in any way. So I don't have any reason to believe that the throw it all out the wall and just be crazy and who cares about traditional media cycles and media narratives. I have no evidence that that's working in his favor.
Well, we have one big litmus test in November, and we will surely check in with Bill Scher along the road to that. And I just found out before that I'm going to see you in Chicago.
Yes, I'm coming in Monday. I'll be there for the full week. I know you can't stay for the whole week. but hopefully we can catch up.
The old OB gave me a finger wag when I floated the idea that I would be away from my late third trimester pregnant wife for 6 days. So I will likely not be there for the whole stretch, but I will hopefully run into you on Monday. And of course, by you, I mean Bill Scher of Washington Monthly. What do you got cooking over there?
You should check out my work from last week. I went very deep on J.D. Vance last week, which I think the more layers I peel, the more illuminating his whole story is to me. It's a stunning grift, J.D. Vance. If you haven't read Hillbilly Elegy, you should read it. You should read his work before Hillbilly Elegy. It is just a night and day transformation of who he was and who he is today in such a short period of time. And so I got both a column on Vance at the Washington Monthly and a companion newsletter piece that has additional analysis, which you can get on the WashingtonMonthly.com website or on our Substack newsletter.
There we go. Thank you very much, Bill.
Check out. I'll see you in a week.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. Big thank you to Bill Scher making his return to the program. I also want to thank our debuting sponsor for the stretch run of this election season. It is KALSHI.com, KALSHI.com. Use KALSHI.com/P3. You get a $20 bonus for the first 500 people who sign up with our code and deposit $100. Head on over there right now. KALSHI.com/PX3. If you would like to email me, it is theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Find, follow, and share clips of the show. Justin R. Young on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. You can follow all the episodes, the full-length episodes, on our YouTube, youtube.com/politics, and you can share the audio version of this show at px3podcast.com. If you want to support me for heading out on the road and being your independent reporter in the center of the political action, you can do so. PayPal.me/PayJury. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. P.O. Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. Again, that is Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas 78715. You can only get our bonus content, however, at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. $3 tier gets you 2 bonus podcasts per week covering all the news we missed on our free podcasting schedule. And our $10 tier gets your name read at the end of the show, like these fine folks in the Titanic $10 tier, including our newest $10 tier member, Sean. It's a Sean B. I'm pretty sure it's the Sean B that I think it is. Welcome to the team, brother. CP, David, Nicholas, Whiskey Wolf, Sparky from Stevens, Florida, Will Porta, SingleTreeTravel.com, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Devon the CFP, Gloria, Grayzone, Peapaw, Jay, Sugar Brady, Marcus with a Q, DP4 Bongo, Sam, John, Niemeister, Edwin, and vote Gloria Young for King of the New World Order. Edison, Jeremy, a dog named Checkers, Sarah, Jeannie, Matthew, Dr. G, Neil, his nerdiness, Charles, Audrey Stoll Adler, Spot, Darren, Idris Arslanian, Bluefront, and the Lenina, Berkeley, Stephen, Chad, Zombie Doc, Matt P, Chill, Adam, Chief Andy, Robert, Casey, Paul, Dustin, Brad, D. Laser, Nick, Just Another Pilot, Middle-Aged Mike, Utah Jimmy Montana, The Jen, Elo, D. Really, Craig, and Andrew. If you want your name mentioned on this show in the Titanic $10 tier, especially as we round the bend into the home stretch, big episodes here, well, you need to head on over right now. TakePoliticsSeriously.com. On our next episode, we have Ryan Macbeth to explain what is happening right now in the world lots going on. And to be totally honest, because this is airing later in the week, I'm recording this interview at the beginning of the week. I might have to just release everything early because we are still waiting for what is going to happen with Iran and Israel. But still, we'll be able to know a general lay of the land in the way that Macbeth is always great at talking about. So, till then, this is your old pal Justin Robert Young saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss all three.